Trouble in Paradise, Part 4, Passenger and Driver. Baxter needed help, but from who? Slowly, he pushed himself up in bed. His mind wandered back to the card that Lydia had handed to Harlem. He had to call them. They would know what to do, could explain what was happening to his body. Baxter racked his memory, retracing his steps, searching for where he had placed that business card. Baxter kicked off the blanket and rummaged through his bedside table. Moisturizer, lip balm, and melatonin. No card. He slammed it shut and moved to the other side. Loose change, an old candle. Still nothing. He cursed under his breath. Baxter walked into the living room and flipped on the light switch. He tore through the couch cushions. He pulled out an earring that wasn't his and flicked it. Between the cushions, a dollar bill, a crumpled tissue, but no business card. He crouched and peered under the couch, sweeping his hand across the tile floor. Shit, he muttered, pushing up to his feet and headed to the kitchen. He opened the trunk drawer near the fridge. Batteries, takeout menus, rubber bands. Not there. He opened the cabinets. The plates clinked loudly as he rummaged through them. Baxter's breathing had become quicker. He scanned the kitchen counters and froze. The trash can sat in the corner, half full. He stared at it for a long second, thinking, there's no way it's in there. He pulled the trash can toward him and grabbed the rim of the can, pulling the bag open. He stared down at greasy paper bags and takeout boxes that had been peeled open at the top. Wet noodles were stuck to clumps of dried rice. Sprinkled over the mess were chopped vegetables that had turned a nasty shade of brown. Beside it, a banana peel had turned black and soft, laying in a pool of old, sticky coffee that had leaked through the bottom. A trace of white paper with the symbol of a gold palm tree lay, soaking up the juices from the old coffee. Baxter recoiled his head. The smell should have hit him like a slap, but it didn't. He cursed and swallowed. His hand hovered over the mess for a second, debating. With no other option left, he shoved it in. His fingers grazed past the slimy noodles and dug into the cold skin of the banana peel. A soggy napkin, wrapped around an unknown lump that squished like fat, clung to his knuckles like wet fabric. He hissed through the mess. Baxter's fingers finally brushed against the edges of the card, touching the pool of cold coffee. He grabbed the card and yanked it free, smearing dark liquid across the front of it. It was bent, and its once clean lettering was warped and damp, but it was the card. Baxter flung the juices off it. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number on the card. The line rang and rang. Then a voice spoke. Baxter's breathing hitched. He was ready to tell them everything. I'm sorry. The line you were trying to reach has been disconnected. Goodbye. Then the voice hung up. Baxter stared at his home screen, baffled. He must have dialed the wrong number. Carefully this time, he keyed it again, reading each number out loud. The line rang and rang until a flat, detached voice cut through. I'm sorry. The line you were trying to reach has been disconnected. Goodbye. The call dropped. Baxter's hands twitched. The business card slipped between his fingers and fell to the floor. A lump swelled in his throat as he lowered himself onto the kitchen floor. His gaze drifted back to the phone in his palm, landing on the mail app. Then he remembered the email they had sent him the night before the procedure. He opened the app, thumb flicking through his starred messages. Nothing. Panic tightened in his chest. Try keywords, he thought. He typed in Gray Beauty Supplies Building. The screen pulsed with a loading icon, then flashed blank. Had they unsent it? Nausea washed over Baxter as he leaned against the cabinet. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. The kitchen began to spin. His stomach lurched, and the shadows around him shifted. His vision wavered. black flecks crowding the edges, so he shut his eyes. "Not again," he pleaded, taking a deep breath. A soft echo rippled through Baxter's skull, quiet at first. Then it swelled, sharpening into a voice. Harlem's voice. "I want you to see exactly how it happened," he uttered. When Baxter's eyes fluttered open, he was standing inside a cold, familiar room. Two beds stood before him, the red machine positioned behind them. Lydia was beside one of the beds, adjusting the butterfly needle on a rolling IV pole that had been connected to the machine. Next to her sat a tray of alcohol pads, cotton balls, and folded paper towels. Baxter stepped closer and froze. Harlem lay unconscious on the bed. A curved steel frame rested over his head, with padded arms pressed against his temples. His stiff limbs and arms were strapped to the sides of the bed. Harlem's breath came, slow and steady, until his fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open, dazed and confused. "Lydia?" he muttered. He tried to lift his arms, but they couldn't move. His legs, too, refused to budge. Realization dawned in his widening eyes. Lydia pulled on a pair of gloves and turned to him with a calm smile. "Good afternoon." "Why am I strapped to this bed?" Harlem demanded, twisting against the clamps that pinned his head in place. She didn't answer. Instead, she tore open an alcohol pad, parted his curls, and began to clean the crown of his head. Harlem swore at her and jerked his head violently. The stabilizer clanked in protest. "I wouldn't pull so hard if I were you," Lydia said evenly. The last time someone tried that, she dented the side of her skull. The alcohol pad hit the metal bin with a hollow clang. "I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't what I signed up for." "I understand how you're feeling, Harlem," Lydia replied. "If I were in your position, I'd react the same way." "Then you know that this is crazy," he snapped. "You know that what you're doing to me is wrong." Harlem glared, as if ready to flick beads of venom at her. "Regardless of whether this is right or wrong," Lydia said, "you won't be the first, and you won't be the last. We've been doing this for a long time, and we'll keep doing it for even longer." "The police!" Harlem gasped. "They'll come looking for me, for everyone you've done this to." Lydia shook her head, still smiling. "We have our hands in many pockets. Exposing one part of us exposes all of us. Our investors wouldn't want that." Harlem's voice came out, a quiet whisper. "What are you going to do to me?" Lydia leaned in close. "Think of this as sinking into a peaceful sleep. As you descend, each one of your five senses will slowly shut down, but you won't be gone. Not completely. A sliver of you will still be in there, somewhere. Your existence will be of a passenger, and someone else will be behind the wheel." At her words, a sickly wave washed over Baxter. Harlem stared at her, horrified. Then he pulled his lips back and spat on Lydia's face. Her eyes widened in shock as his saliva slid down her cheek. For a moment, the only sound came from Baxter's heartbeat, thundering so hard it felt ready to burst through his chest. Lydia calmly reached for a paper towel, wiped her face, and tossed it into the trash. Then she circled to the head of the bed and leaned over Harlem, her expression unreadable. "Do you know what happened to the last person who spat in my face while lying on this bed?" she asked with deceptive softness. "I ruptured her brain so badly, her skull split open, and I watched her drown in her own blood." Baxter's body went cold. His mouth tasted like pennies. His head swam. Lydia pressed a button on the red machine. A low hum filled the air, followed by a faint hiss of air from its vents, steady and rhythmic, like breathing. "Let's hope the same doesn't happen to you," she murmured. Harlem thrashed violently against his restraints, but it was useless. His scream tore through the room. Baxter flinched and clamped his hands over his ears. It didn't help. The sound was inhuman. No pair of lungs should have been able to sustain it. Lydia picked up the butterfly needle from the ivy pole and drove it into the crown of Harlem's skull. His body went rigid, then slack. His limbs fell limp. His head dropped back against the bed, and his open mouth released only silence. Lydia pressed another button on the machine, labeled push. Harlem's body convulsed violently. A shiver rippled through him. Goosebumps rose in a slow, deliberate wave up his legs, spreading across his chest and crawling up his neck toward his skull. Tears welled in Baxter's eyes. He shouted at her to stop, but his voice vanished under the hum of the machine. Thick blue veins bulged from Harlem's neck, pulsing up his temples and curling toward the corner of his eyes. The color drained from them, blue fading to a ghostly gray as his eyes rolled back. Then the room began to warp. Lydia, Harlem, and the beds melted away, the shadows twisting and the colors bleeding together. Baxter gasped and blinked hard. He was back on the kitchen floor, his chest slick with sweat. He slumped back against the cabinet, cold tile against his skull. Baxter sat, frozen, as the pounding in his chest faded to a dull echo. His mind replayed it all, every sound, every moment, burning each image deeper into memory. Then, Lydia's voice echoed through him. As you descend, each one of your 5 senses will slowly shut down. Baxter's stomach tightened. He thought back to the things he couldn't explain. The moment he couldn't smell Leo, the vanilla-scented candle in the bathroom, or even the stench from the trash can, the orange juice that tasted like nothing, his hearing flickering in and out while Leo argued with him. Was what happened to Harlem beginning to happen to him too? If his senses were shutting down one by one, what came next? His vision? You won't be gone. Not completely, Lydia had told Harlem. A sliver of you will still be in there, somewhere. And then Baxter remembered what she told him after the procedure. Residual fragments of the previous consciousness may still linger. No drugs, anything that alters with your brain chemistry, will interfere with your adjustment. His breath hitched. In doing so, had he unknowingly, recklessly, stupidly opened a door between himself and Harlem that was never meant to open? Oh my God, he muttered, running his hands through his hair, then stopped. His fingers brushed the faint ridge where Lydia had driven the needle into Harlem's skull. A wave of nausea punched through him. Baxter jerked his hands away, bile stinging his throat. Disgust rolled in, at himself, at Lydia, at the horror of what he'd been a part of. He swallowed hard, trembling, certain he was about to be sick. On the dark screen of his phone, a faint reflection stared back at him. Something felt wrong. He opened the camera and raised it toward his face. His breathing hitched. He lifted the camera higher, focusing on his eyes. His pupils quivered. From the depths of his irises, something else. Another set of eyes pressed forward, growing. A sound ripped out of him, half revulsion, half horror, as the phone clattered from his grip. He needed help, but from who? His mind stuttered, blank. Then a thought bloomed, sharp and whole. There was nothing else left to do. With trembling fingers, he picked the phone up and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I think something's wrong with my body. Sir, what's your name? Baxter Winslow. Mr. Winslow, what symptoms are you experiencing? The dispatcher asked. I keep witnessing these memories that aren't mine. I can't smell or taste anything. My hearing keeps cutting in and out and... His breath caught. Something's happening to my eyes. It's like there's something growing inside them. The dispatcher paused. Mr. Winslow, have you taken any drugs recently? Baxter wet his cracked lips, hesitating. Yes, Molly. How long ago? Last night. And did these symptoms, you noticed them after taking it? After. Where are you right now? Maurice Residences, 1740 Biscayne Boulevard, Unit 47B. The sound of typing filled the line. Mr. Winslow, would you like us to send an ambulance? Yes, as soon as possible. All right, I'm dispatching one now. How long? Baxter cut in, his voice tight. Estimated arrival was 14 minutes. Baxter groaned. You said you live in 47B. Do you live with anyone else? Family? Roommates? A spouse? No, just me. Will you be able to meet the EMTs on the ground floor, or do you need them to come up to your apartment? I can walk, Baxter muttered, forcing himself to his feet. His legs twitched beneath him. The elevator's close by. I'll wait in the lobby. Good. Stay on the line with me until they arrive. Baxter hurried back into his bedroom, snatched a hoodie, wallet, and keychain, then slid into a pair of closed sandals. The hallway outside was dim, lit by faint overhead strips. He turned right, and thunder shook the walls. He quickened his pace, made a left, and saw the elevator at the end. But before he reached it, a tingling started at the tips of his fingers and toes, subtle at first, then sharper. His skin felt as though it were vibrating from the inside out. Panic rose in his chest. The metal doors parted. Baxter stumbled inside, pressing his weight against the glass wall as the doors closed. The elevator began to descend. On a screen, the signal bars flickered. Are you still there? He asked. The dispatcher responded, but her voice began to crackle through the speaker. I I said, are you, don't, if... Her voice began to stutter, and her syllables became garbled. He pulled the phone closer to his mouth. I can't hear you. Say that again? Silence swallowed him whole. Then the tingling surged. It rippled up his arms in jagged waves. His legs convulsed, twitching against their will. His chest clenched. His stomach knotted as if something inside him was swelling, pushing, wanting him out. A sudden burst of garbled noise erupted from the phone. The dispatcher's words were coming out in fragments. Hello? Hello? Baxter's voice echoed within the elevator's mirrored walls. He blinked hard, willing his fingers to move, but they hung, stiff and useless, like dead twigs. His legs buckled like a puppet with cut strings. The phone slipped free, clattering onto the floor. He tried to bend, to reach, but his arms refused to obey. The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open. Baxter staggered forward, one leg dragging across the other. His arms swung stiffly, more like dead weights than limbs. He braced himself against the frame to stop from collapsing. The lobby stretched out, mostly empty, except for two figures. Leo sat, slouched in an armchair, face twisted in fury. A crushed water bottle pressed against his nose, tissues jutting out like white plugs. Beside him, the front desk worker hovered with a box of bloody tissues, his face pale and uncertain. The worker glanced up, startled when he saw Baxter. Sir, are you okay? He asked, already setting the box down and rushing toward him. I need help, Baxter's voice rasped, the words clawing their way out of his throat. The man hooked an arm beneath Baxter, hauling him toward another chair across from Leo. Baxter sagged into it. Leo turned his head, eyes narrowing with disgust. Baxter's stomach lurched violently. Acid clawed back up his throat. He tried to choke it down, but the sight of Leo, his sneer, his disdain, tore away at the last of his control. A guttural sound rattled from his chest. Then it erupted. Vomit surged out, hot and steaming, splattering across Leo's face. Thick chunks clung to his hair and dripped from his open mouth. His shirt darkened with streaks of bile. The stench instantly soured the air. The front desk worker recoiled, gagging. For a second, the lobby froze, Leo staring in horrific disbelief, Baxter shaking, saliva still stringing from his lips. The puddle on the floor spread outward, creeping toward their shoes. Then Leo screamed, a raw, animalistic sound. He clawed at his face, sputtering, coughing, gagging as vomit dripped down his chin. Baxter stared, wide-eyed, and in a delirious state. A hoarse chuckle rattled in his chest. The sight of Leo, once furious, now smeared with his vomit, was laughable. But then his vision tunneled. His muscles gave out. In one violent tremor, he collapsed back into the chair, darkness closing in fast. Baxter drifted, stuck between blackout and waking. His eyes fluttered beneath their lids. The headache lurked far off, but it lingered deep in the depths of his skull. Beneath his closed lids, slivers of light bled through, red, then blue, then both at once. The glow swelled, pressing closer, until muffled voices began to swell with it. They were scattered, like a dozen people murmuring underwater. But through the chaos, another sound forced its way in. An echo, quiet at first, began to grow sharper. Harlem's voice throbbed with rage. You took my body. And then came the sensation, a prickly feeling inside the back of Baxter's head, like a hand had begun to tighten its grip around his skull. Harlem's voice roared now, directly into his ears. His words were undeniable. Give it back! Without warning, an ear-splitting headache erupted and drowned Baxter's world in white fire. His eyes snapped open. The lights above seared into him. He raised his hands, shielding his vision. Slowly, his vision adjusted, and as he lowered his hands, the blurs around sharpened into faces. Leo, the front desk worker, and several first responders all bent over him. Their eyes widened. They all flinched back. Baxter pushed himself upright, heart hammering. What? His voice cracked. No one answered. They only stared. What? He demanded again, louder. One of the first responders, with a name tag that read Dre, finally spoke. Your eyes. Her voice trailed as the others turned to one another, their expression twisted into shared disbelief. Baxter's pulse spiked. What's wrong with them? He scanned their faces. The front desk worker pulled out his phone, flipped the camera, and held it toward him. For the first time, Baxter understood what the word horror truly meant. His irises had split open, ruptured like torn fabric. From the black of his pupils, something pressed outward, blue eyes that weren't his. They writhed and forced their way through, straining against his own. As they emerged, they shoved past his eyes and began crushing them inward. Blood burst in tiny specks, blooming across the white. Along his temples, veins swelled, red and blue. They snaked beneath his skin, thick as cables. A choked scream tore from Baxter's throat. He tried to stagger to his feet. He had to run. The first responders shouted for him to sit back down, but their voices were distant, meaningless. His vision began to fracture, splitting. To escape into someone else's body, anyone's at this point, would be mercy. Baxter lurched forward, but his foot skidded in the slick puddle of vomit. He slipped, smashing into the floor. The world blurred, and then the dark swallowed everything whole. Baxter opened his eyes, and the lobby, the first responders, the chaos, were gone. Instead, that familiar black void stretched beyond him, pressing in from all directions. A sharp, ragged breath tore from his lungs. From the darkness, a shape began to emerge. Inch by inch, the figure rose, crawling out of the abyss as if the void itself had birthed it. His gaze locked on Baxter with fury. His stare wasn't just angry, it was unrelenting and determined. When Harlem stood up fully, the void shuddered, as if the ground had drawn a breath, and Baxter's body shuddered with it. And to think, Harlem sneered, if it weren't for you taking those drugs, you never would have woken me up. Baxter's mind screamed at him to move, to run, but his limbs wouldn't obey. He no longer had control over this body. He had unwillingly become the passenger, locked inside, watching as someone else took control of the wheel. The ground trembled beneath Baxter's feet and began to ripple. The void opened under him. He tried to stagger back, but it was too late. The surface gave way, beginning to swallow his ankles and knees. Panic flared up in his chest. A cold, vicious force gripped him from below, slowly dragging him down. It began to swallow his stomach and chest. His body trembled like a bundle of live wires. His throat burned with a desperate plea for rescue. The last thing Baxter saw was Harlem staring down at him. Then the darkness surged over his head, and everything was gone. Baxter's body drifted downward through the endless dark. Above, Harlem shrank into a dot before eventually disappearing. He turned in slow, helpless circles, scanning for any sign of life. There was nothing. He inhaled, and there was no scent, just a sterile nothingness. Everything was silent, broken only by the steady rush of his own descent. There was no wind, but instead, the sound of space swallowing him whole. Baxter opened his mouth and screamed until his throat was raw, but his voice only came back as a distant echo. He knew then, with a certainty that hollowed him out, his worst fear had become his reality. Baxter was alone. "Set the gurney right beside him," Dre ordered. Two male paramedics, one taller than the other, rolled a gurney into the lobby and positioned it beside the man lying on the floor in a puddle of his own vomit. Together, they lifted him onto the gurney, his arms swinging loosely at his sides. The taller paramedic steadied the man's head and caught a glimpse of the black palm tree behind his ear. The shorter paramedic pulled a wide strap across his chest and locked it with a sharp click. Leo sat on the lobby couch, wiping bile from his clothes with a large towel the paramedics gave him. The front desk worker sat beside him, while another paramedic questioned them, but Leo barely registered a word. His eyes stayed, locked on the team surrounding Baxter. "Secure the legs," Dre said, her voice firm over the buzz of radios. The man's toes began to twitch, then his fingers. Straps snapped in, placed one after the other, across his waist, over his thighs, and around his ankles. Though his eyes were closed, the movement beneath his lids churned violently. "Hold on," the taller paramedic uttered. "He seems conscious." All three leaned in. The man's eyes flew open, streaked with thin red veins. He gasped and lurched upright, clawing at the restraints. "Sir, calm down," Dre urged, pressing a hand to his chest. He shoved her off. "Sir!" the two male paramedics shouted, pushing him back onto the gurney. But he fought against them with surprising strength. "Let me go," he bellowed. "You passed out and hit your head on the floor," Dre insisted. "We're taking you to the hospital." "No, take me to the police," he snapped, driving his palm into one paramedic's stomach. The man groaned and doubled over. "Keep acting like this, and we just might," the shorter paramedic spat angrily. Dre hesitated, squinting at the man. "Wait," she interjected, stepping closer. His eyes weren't hazel anymore. They were blue. "I need to go to the police," the man sputtered urgently, "to report a crime. I was held hostage by a woman named Lydia." The paramedics exchanged confused looks. "Didn't they say he was on something when he called?" the taller one asked. "Molly," the shorter one snorted. Dre spoke again, slowly. "Sir, you said you were hearing and seeing things. You called for an ambulance. We're taking you to the hospital." "You're not listening!" he roared. The paramedics forced him flat again. The gurney rattled, its wheels squealing under the pressure. "Her name was Lydia," he gasped. "She offered me a job, took me hostage, experimented on me. She put someone inside me." The paramedics went silent for a moment. "Sir," the shorter paramedic said, shaking his head, "you need to calm down. I'm not the only one she's done this to. She kept me in a building, blue and I can't remember the other color, but it had a gold palm tree on the front door. The men on the gurney searched their faces until his gaze caught on Dre. Their eyes locked. "Please, take me to the police," he whispered, breath trembling, blue eyes desperate. "I'll tell them everything." A jagged strike of white light split the sky, followed by the clap of thunder that rattled the windows of the street below. Rain poured over the dark, deserted road lined with run-down buildings. The street lay still, emptied of all life. A weak, flickering bulb cast a glow over the front steps of a blue and orange building with no windows. Rain seeped into the cracks of the concrete steps that crawled toward a heavy steel door. Above the door, illuminated by the light, the number 9 stood stark, below a golden palm tree. Inside, the waiting room was deserted, drowned in shadows. The receptionist's desk sat empty and tidy, lit only by a single table lamp. The silence pressed in, thick and unbroken. Down the long corridor, the overhead lights buzzed faintly, dim to near darkness. The speakers that once played music were shut off. Every numbered door stood shut. Rain hammered in the ceiling above, where water had begun to pool in a brown patch that sagged. A single drop tore through, streaking down the surface of the door marked with the number 4. Within room 4, the glow of dozens of monitors filled the walls. Each screen displayed a different brain scan, faint lines pulsing across them. But scattered amongst the active screens were others that were black and silent. The room was still, until, without warning, a beeping fractured the silence. One scan flared bright red. In its bottom corner, letters began to spell Baxter Winslow. Another alarm followed. The largest black screen in the center of the wall flickered to life, first showing a palm tree against red. The tree dissolved into a string of numbers, which twisted and reformed into words. Echo Locus 001, waking up. More numbers unraveled, transforming into a second message. Baxter Winslow, containment breached. Immediate action required. The text vanished. A map materialized. A curved line of dots spread across its surface before stopping on a single point. The center dot pulsed red as new words scrolled across the bottom. Coordinates obtained. Contacting assistance. The end.